7800X3D managed 225 FPS on
All
average,
right, we're
making the
recording.
13700K 2%
Now
faster,
we look good.
which does mean that performance between these two parts was basically identical,
Let's turn up the
but it
browser
also means that
sound
the
just a little
13900K was
bit.
8% faster. Again, not horrible margins by any means, but the new 3D
Is that
Vcache
too loud?
was slower here.
Maybe that is.
Another bad title for the new 3D Vcache processors
right
is
about
Counter-Strike
there. That's
Global
probably
Offensive.
good. All right, so we
Basically,
can
the game
listen
doesn't
to
require
the
any more L3 cache.
hardware
The standard
unbox
processors have
fella
more than enough for this
giving
game.
his spiel
Rather,
on
the issue here is CPU frequency.
the
So
new
clocking the 7800X3D slower resulted in a massive
6800X3D,
19%
the
performance
magical
loss to the
AMD technology
7700X.
gamers
Last
seem
up, we
to
have a
really
Plague Tale
like.
Requiem, and here the 7800X3D is fine.
I'm
though I
upgraded to a
suspect we're against system bottlenecked around
7600X, and to be
150
honest,
FPS.
playing
It
at
was basically able to match the Raptor Lake parts, offering a mild
above
14% boost over the standard Zen 4 part.
WQHD
In this example,
resolution,
Intel's
I
Core i9
don't think
13900K
it
pushed total
makes
system usage
really
just
any difference
16%
what
higher than the
processor you're
7800X3D.
using.
And while that was still a 73 watt increase in power
Kind of
draw,
why I
it's
believe
by
that.
no means the worst
It's
result
not
that
just
we've
like
seen.
my
But of
feeling,
course,
but
given that performance was basically
I've
identical, consuming an additional
done
73
kind of
watts
some
is no
real-time
good result for
benchmarking where
Intel.
I just leave up like the metrics while I'm playing games, and in doing that, like every game, even ones which I'll get into in a bit, are notorious for like not really getting everything out of the GPU. Even those games are like 97 to 100 all the time. So like kind of my method. Let's get these ads out of here. Boom.
Okay, so here's the 12 game average. The 7800X3D basically matched
yeah,
the
like
750X3D in the end.
Like my
making it just
method of
3%
just kind of
faster
leaving it
than the
running and going
1300K.
around, I
So
feel
while
like
that's technically a
it's
win
kind
for
of the
AMD,
best
I think
way
it is fair
to
say that
really
overall performance is much the same.
benchmark
The 1300K gains
for
around
yourself,
5% more
because
performance on average when going from DDR5
what you get when you're
6400 to
watching
7200
something
memory.
like
So
this
if we were to
is
pair the Intel
it's
processor
like
with the more affordable DDR5 memory, the 7800X3D would be around 7 to 8%
informative
faster.
way
When compared
to
to the
get an
13700K,
idea of
we're
the
looking at a
product
6%
without
performance
getting your
uplift,
hands
which is
on
still
it.
pretty small overall,
But in
and
my
then just an 11%
experience,
boost over
over
the standard 7700X.
25,
Of course, there are examples where the performance
almost
uplift was
30
far more
years
substantial,
of like
but
building
there are also examples where
PCs
we saw
and
basically no
trying to
performance
get
uplift.
get
You might
everything I
also
can
find this
out of
graph
them
interesting.
for
Here's a
gaming
look at the
mostly, but
total system
also
power
for
consumption averaged
writing
across the 6
code,
games where we looked
building
at power
software,
usage.
that
I've
sort
also
of
included
stuff.
the average frame rate performance for the 6 games
It's
that we're
really
looking
like
at.
until you
And
get
as
your
you can
hands
see, on
on it,
average,
you
the
don't know.
7800X3D was just
Particularly
2.5%
because
faster than the 1300K in this
like
data set.
this day and
But
age,
the
you're going to
Core
be
i9
running
processor
like
pushed total system
Discord.
consumption
You might be
28%
doing some
higher.
video
Then when
capture
compared
plus
to the
streaming.
7700X,
There's just like
the
all these things that
7800X3D was on
factor
average
in
13%
to
faster in those
where
games while using about 4%
you're
less
not
power.
going to get the
So the
results
7800X3D
very
isn't
likely
just very
that
fast for
that you
gaming,
see in
it's also extremely power efficient.
these ads.
Okay, time for some
And
cost
even
per
more
frame
so,
data,
like
and
if you're a
right off the bat,
person
I'm going to have to
that's
highlight the
just
fact that I'm
looking
not including
for
the
a
cheaper, but just as
pre-built
effective
PC
non-X Ryzen
of
processors.
some
And there are a few reasons
form,
for this. Firstly, adding another 3 processors to the testing would have
oftentimes you're
required
not
time
going
that I
to
simply
get
didn't have.
what you
And on top of
see
that,
in like
I'd then have to
this
include the
kind of thing.
non-K
What's
Intel
going to
processors,
happen
and
is
before you know
the
it,
pre-built
the total number of
PC is going to
CPUs tested
have
has quickly doubled. Having said all of that, though,
a
if the data was vital to
configuration
this
that
review, I would have
is
included it, but
suboptimal,
realistically, most people
and
considering
it's
something like the 700X3D
and I mean
for
that
gaming
both
are
at the
after a
hardware
non-compromise
level,
type
but
solution,
also
and
at
therefore will likely
the
only be
software
considering
level.
a
So
high-end
it's going to
CPU
have
that
like
offers maximum performance.
this
You
great
can also make your
CPU,
own
right?
pricing
Like
adjustments.
you
The
come in and
7700,
you're
for
like,
example, is about 5% slower
I
than the
want the
7700X.
fastest
So
gaming
just reduce the
CPU. Let's say
performance
it's the
shown here from 199 FPS to
7800X3D.
say
And then it's
190
going to have like
FPS, and then
memory
recalculate with your
that's
updated pricing.
not
Anyway,
at
comparing with
all
the
like
higher-end models,
conducive
the
with
7800X3D
getting the
comes at a
best out of
cost per
that
frame of
processor. So
$2.03,
I don't
placing it alongside
know
the
100% off
7700X
top of
and
my head, but
13700K
I
in
want to
terms of
say
value.
like something
This
like
also means that it's 25% better value than the
6,000
13900K and 36% better value
just like
than the
DDR5.
7950X3D.
So like a
That said,
6,000
though, we
with like
should
a
probably recalculate with the
CL32
motherboard
is
and
kind of
memory
like
pricing
the
included.
exact
So a
sweet
total
spot.
system cost analysis then.
But you
With
might
AM5,
see
you're
something
faced with
like
having to pay at least
a
$206 US for an
4800
entry-level X670E motherboard,
like
while usable B650 boards
CL36,
start at $140.
and
But since
that'll
I want
be
to
what
compare high-end platforms, and
come in
Intel
your nice
Z690 and
pre-built
Z790 pricing
machine.
is
So
much the same at
obviously
around $200,
It's
I
probably
thought it was
not
only
gonna
fair
be
to
like
evaluate the cost per
massive,
frame of
but you're probably
AM5
gonna
using
lose
an
like
X670E
enough
motherboard.
frames to
So for
where
AM5,
if
I'm
you
using the $260
then
US
go
ASRock
and
X670E PG Lightning, which I know to be a
look
good
at, say, one of
motherboard. And then, of course,
these
we're
kind of
factoring in the price of
hardware
DDR5
unboxed or
6000
one of the
cell 3
other
memory,
great
which comes in at
online
$140
reviewers,
right now.
if you look
Then
at
for Intel,
their
there are
breakdown,
multiple Z690
it might
and
actually be
Z790
enough frames
motherboards
you're
available
losing
for
because that
$200 US,
RAM
while
to
the
like
DDR5
shift you
7200
under a
memory that
whole
we
other
use to achieve these
processor.
results costs $205
You know, you
US.
might
And
be
this means you could save
all
around
of a sudden
$60 on the Intel build
that
by opting for DDR5
X3D is
6400,
looking
but performance will be reduced
closer
by
to
around
just
5%.
the non-3D,
Also, you can
which
save $120
you could
US
buy
on the AMD
and save
AM5 build by
$100
going
right
with an
there,
entry-level
right?
B650 board,
So
but you'll be dropping a large number of
that
features
that
by
begets
doing
another
so.
point, which is
So with
like,
those
where do you
values all
spend your
punched into
money
our
when you're
graph,
building a
this is what we
PC? And
find.
I
The
think there's
7800X3D combo comes out
there's
to a
like a
cost of
major
$3.84,
um
making it one of the best value high-end combos, or rather the best
there's
value
like a
high-end combo.
major issue
It's a
in
few
your
percent cheaper
building
than the
systems
13700K, and it's
that
17% cheaper than the
goes
13900K,
into
saving you around $135 US.
where you get in the weeds
This
a
is
little,
real B&H customer
where
story.
you're trying to purchase all these different parts and make them work well
So there you have it.
together,
The Ryzen 7
and
7800X 3D is one of the fastest
you
gaming
can
CPUs in the market right now.
most people
It's
can't
also
afford
the
to
most
just have
power
like
efficient while
all
offering
these
a high
different
level of
parts on
value at
hand
$450
and be able to like swap
US.
things around
There
and
are certainly
test
better value
the
deals
hardware
out there, such as
configurations,
the
right?
Ryzen 7 7700
It's very
non-X or
difficult
even the
to
7600, but
um
they're also slow.
or I shouldn't
So
say
when it comes
difficult,
to
it's very
sort of top-tier
expensive
gaming
because
performance,
shit,
the
if you have
value
the
of
money or if you're
7800X3D
like
just can't
hardware
be beaten right
unboxed
now.
and you got the
You could also throw
hookup,
this
it's
thing
like
on the
not a big
absolute
deal.
cheapest AM5 motherboard you
But
can
for the
find.
rest
We're
of us,
talking
we
around
kind of
$100
have
here,
to
and the
operate in
7800X3D will still perform as shown in this
uh,
review. And that's
a
not
mode
something
where
you can
like
say about the Core
the
i9
knowledge
1300K, which is a
guides you in
MOSFET
your purchase
imploder on
decision, and
low-end
hopefully it's a
boards.
good one.
Well, that's
And
not
you
necessarily
kind of
true.
back up that
You're just
knowledge
heavily
of
power limited, which will
what's
degrade
good. Say like
performance. And don't get me wrong,
6000
the 1300K
CL32
is still
for
a
the X,
mighty impressive
the
processor
new
and
Ryzen.
a terrific gaming CPU.
So you're using
But it's
that
not without
knowledge, and you're
flaws.
gonna
The
also
need for expensive
augment that
DDR5
with
memory to roughly
whatever
match
other
the
experiential
7800X3D
data you
does
can
hurt
find
to
out there
value,
from other
though
people.
it has
There
to
are
be said it will still
people
get
saying like, I
reasonably close
use
with much cheaper
this
memory.
combo,
So
I
as I
got
see it, the
these
real issue
results.
here
It's
is power
pretty hard to
consumption and, of
find that
course, platform
information. Most of what
longevity.
you're gonna find
Those
is
total
just
system power figures
thumbs
when
up,
gaming
thumbs
were
down
quite
kind of
shocking,
stuff,
and they explain why
and
the
you don't know
1300K
anything
still
about
manages
like
to run
the
so hot in demanding
not
games. It
character,
just sucks
but
down a
like the
tremendous
experience
amount
level
of
of the
power
person
for a
that's
CPU.
giving
When it
those
comes to productivity,
opinions.
though, the 1300K
But yeah,
is
like
simply in a different
hardware
league,
very
as is the
difficult to
13700K.
um
Though I should note
to
both
kind
are
of
extremely
optimize
power
there,
hungry for all-core
because you
productivity
would need to
workloads,
buy
and they
lots
really
and
do
lots
need
of
to be
different parts.
power
Like
limited.
what
And
I'm
at
saying
that
is
point,
like
I think you're
just
better
focusing on
served
the
by the
RAM, even if you
7950X or
knew
7950X3D,
6000
which typically deliver a
CL32
similar
was
level of
what you
performance to
want.
that of
That's
a
the sweet spot of
non-power
like
limited i7 or
the amount of money
i9,
you're
while
spending
reducing total
and
system
kind of
usage by
wringing
half,
out the
which is a
performance from the
staggering difference.
processor, are
And then there's
really just
platform
like
support. Spending
keeping it
$200
from
on an LGA
being
1700
blocked,
board to pair
you
it with a
know, so that it can
1300K
kind of
means your next CPU upgrade will
do
require
its
a new
best,
motherboard.
live its
And this won't
best
necessarily
life
be
as
the
a
case with a
processor.
$260 AM5
Even if
board,
you
and this goes a long way
or
helping you
uncork
swallow
it,
that
you know,
price
sometimes you hear
premium.
that.
I
It's
still
like,
don't
you know,
like it. I think
uncorking the
AM5 boards are far
performance.
too
It's like,
expensive, especially those
uh,
X670
anyway,
boards. But the fact that
even
a
if you
Zen
knew
5
that's
CPU
what
will
you're
be
aiming
a
for
viable
RAM,
upgrade on the
you
same
could
board
probably
should
order
end up being a seriously big
multiple
deal.
different
But I guess we'll
kits,
find out next year.
multiple
And
different
then support beyond that,
motherboards.
not entirely
Let's
sure, but I
just
think we will
try
get
to,
another
I'm trying
CPU
not to
series
make
on
it
that board, but of
complicated,
course
but
we'll just have to
we'll
wait
throw
and
the
see what AMD
motherboards in
does
there too,
there.
because it really can
At
make
the
a
end of the
big
day, though, I think it
difference
is
in
quite
how
clear to
well
say that
that
arguing
all
about
performs.
which is the fastest gaming CPU
And you could try
is
those
just a
different
complete waste of time. These
configurations,
new
and you
Zen
would
4
see
3D
some
V-Cache
variance, and
parts or the
sometimes that
Core i9
variance can
1300K,
be,
it very much is a
in
waste
my
of time. The
opinion, not
definition of time wasting, in my
inconsequential,
opinion.
right?
They're just
And
both
that's
very
maybe up to
fast
each
CPUs,
person
and there's
individually,
no
but
chance
like,
any
would
gamer
you
will
say
be able to
a
tell them apart when
5%
actually gaming,
performance difference
unless
is
they stick their hand in the
inconsequential?
case, I suppose,
I
and they might
wouldn't,
notice that extra 100
and
watts
you
or
can
so of
easily
the i9.
see
In short, the Ryzen
those
7
type of
7800X X3
gains or
has impressed me with its
losses,
performance, but I'm
depending on
certainly
like
not blown away. It's
what
not
hardware
miles more
configuration you set
powerful
up
than
there. So,
processors we
um,
already had. But I guess if anything's
you
blown
know,
me away, it's how
that's a
power
part of
efficient
it.
this thing
That
is.
going
Like,
back to
how much
pre-made
gamers actually care
PCs, those
about
are
that.
usually like
Kind of hard
these
to say. I guess that's
shitty
something that we'll poll with
mass-produced
the audience after these
motherboards that
reviews go live.
the
Just to get a
vendors
bit of a
like
feel for
farm
that.
out
And I guess
to
that's
another
where I will
company.
end this review.
Those
If you enjoyed it,
companies
do one
are
of those.
all
Subscribe
about
for
just
more. We're
getting
gonna have
the
heaps of
project
benchmark coming
done
up with this CPU.
and
Probably do like a
slamming
30
through
plus
them,
game
right?
benchmark comparing it with
Do
maybe
you
the
think that motherboard
5800X3D,
is going to be
various Intel
of the
CPUs.
highest
Heap of content coming up
quality? You
around
think
this
they're going to
processor,
spend the
so
time to
make sure you
really
subscribe for that. Also, if you'd
make
like to
sure
become a Hardware
that
Unboxed
memory
community
bus
member, you can sign up to
operates
Floatplane
the
or Patreon.
best,
Either one of those will give you
up in the
access to
top
our
of the
exclusive Discord server for
leaderboards if
members
we put
only,
all the
monthly
motherboards
live
together? No,
chats
they're
where
not.
myself, we can ask us
They're
questions live and we'll
purely
answer those.
focused
Q&A
on
series where we do much
getting
the
a
same but not
product
live,
out
and behind
for
the
the
scenes content.
company they're
So, yeah,
contracted
a lot
for,
of cool
whether
stuff
it's
there. Check that
Dell
if you're interested, but if not, that's
or
perfectly fine.
whoever,
And I would like to thank you for watching
and
this
pushing
video.
that out.
I'm your host, Steve.
And
See you next time.
the interesting thing about that is they're gonna make a lot of that motherboard. If you're building that and making it for Dell, you're gonna be very sensitive to making sure everything runs smoothly. Dell's not happy if they contract you. You get them this motherboard design, you get it to them. Oh, I'm gonna kick this off real quick. Yeah, so like, Dell not gonna be happy if your motherboard design ends up coming back as I wonder what happens if actually. Oh, okay, we got the Gamer Nexus one coming up. I'm just gonna play this in the background without sound. Yeah, so I'm sorry. Finally to get it out. But Dell's gonna be pissed if the motherboard design from who are they contracted to do comes back and it has a bunch of issues. Now, relaying to anything that's an engineering kind of thing, right? If you're building cars and you're like on the cutting edge of like performance, your Ferraris or Lamborghinis, things of that nature, those aren't particularly known for their reliability. And if we go back to motherboards, you end up with a lot of the same problems potentially. When you're trying to get performance, you're very like razor laser focused on particular types of goals. You want to go fast, you probably want to stop quickly because you're going fast. There's like these things. Getting 10,000 miles between oil changes, not something you're interested in. Making the maintenance cheap, not something you're interested in. Balancing the weight distribution, okay, yeah, we're there. You're speaking my language. Lowering the weight overall of the vehicle. Now, same thing with motherboards, right? You're building motherboards for Dell. One of the goals is just getting it out quickly because companies like that need to like move fast, because even once you get a design out and you're getting fab going, then and you're getting some test samples and everything seems to work and they put it through like their testing protocols they have. Everything's greenlit. Now we got to like create the overall fab for being able to then push the whole thing into like greater production. Yeah, once you kind of get there to this level of like, production, there's not a lot of room for the race car motherboard, right? Where you're trying to like push and get like the best you can out of the different like performance aspects of the motherboard. You want the Toyota Camry of motherboards. It's not sexy to look at. I mean, if you've ever seen those prefab motherboards, they are still as ugly as motherboards were back in the 90s. When I first started building machines, they're pretty heinous. I mean, if you're lucky, it'll be like black or red or maybe, I don't know, some other color, and it's a little more appealing than that like old green kind of circuit board color. But yeah, the whole interesting thing about motherboards that I'm trying to get at is, like you can definitely have that 5%. It could be more. I mean, I'm sure there's some more outlier cases people could bring up of motherboards that really performed just terribly. Like we're talking like 10% worse than like the best in the generation, or the top of that generation, chipset wise. Yeah, there's got to be some examples out there, but just just for any generation, what I would expect is you could definitely see like a 5% variance in certain things. Like raw frames in games is what we're really talking about here. Um, and yeah, it can make a pretty big difference, right? Because um, when you're trying to kind of build a machine and get the best with these processors, as we were talking about the 7800X3D. When you're trying to get the best, if you're going to shell out that extra $100 for the 3D version, you're going to want to make sure that you're pairing it with other good parts so that you kind of get the best of the best there. You're not losing out. And there's just a lot of things that go into building a good PC. I mean, one you see all the time, and Gamers Nexus, as it just randomly popped up in here, is just the cooling, heating effects. Cases that really do poorly at getting enough airflow, and hence parts heat up, which in this day and age, parts are very advanced compared to my early days of system building. They are smart enough to oftentimes know their temperature, and then based on that, down clock or whatever they needed to do, as well as the fans ramping up, which traditionally is kind of how it worked. Yeah, now you don't even notice like as much, where the thing will just down clock, you're losing frames, you're not getting the full performance that you expect, and that's kind of a modern approach to things. Um, there's also, related to that, just so much energy consumption related tech in these parts now, where um, like AMD's a good example, both for their CPUs and GPUs. Right now I'm running one of both AMD, and they have like profiles, so you just go in and click eco mode, and boom, drop like power consumption by a lot, and oftentimes without taking a massive performance hit. Like, the thing that's surprising is, in these performance parts, how much that power curve starts to like almost exponentially start like going up as you move performance up. Like with the CPU, as you kind of set the max raw processor speed, as you start to drag it up, your power level just starts to climb really quickly. And the eco modes are smart, because they might drop you back, say, from 5200 megahertz on my 7600 to like 4800. I don't even think it's that, though. I think it's like it's like a solid 5 gigahertz, 5000 megahertz. It puts you there, and then you save just like a ton of power, because the processor somehow just, when it goes to 5400 or slightly over that, like it can when it's in its normal configuration, just that 400 megahertz is where it just starts to soak up power use, I guess, and that's what causes um system power to be spiked up. Or I guess I should look at the opposite way of, when you put it in eco mode, that 400 megahertz is no longer boosting into. By taking that away, system power usage just drops like a lot. I think on mine it's what do we oh, hey, it worked earlier. That wasn't working, it was getting jammed up. uh Power usage 7600X. I think it's 95, and then 65 when we put in eco mode. Idle 68. This is just random one we're pulling off. single core. So this is probably max single core 91. So, okay. And then multi-thread 183. When they say 95, I think there's some like averaging in there, like whatever they run it through to determine that number. So, yes, it can go to almost double when all cores are maxed out, but okay, so they didn't have eco mode on here. That sucks. Let's see if we can find eco mode. Yes, it is an affordable Zen 4 for gaming. That's why I purchased it. I mean, I think the CPU, I saw like the combo, the same motherboard I got, which is Aorus Elite Micro ATX, and the processor, and I think it even had RAM, and it was not great RAM, okay RAM, might have been good enough to overclock to 6032. But yeah, it was like some low 500s number. I mean, it seemed like okay deal. I think it was like $509.99. I mean, that's pretty good when you're building a PC because, take that, try to find maybe like a last gen GPU, like a 6800 XT, slap it in there. You got probably like and a used one's fine too. Like, I mean, you can find a used 6100 XT for not a whole lot these days if you take your time and look. So I mean, you could probably build like a pretty banging gaming PC for somewhere in the ballpark of like about 1,000. Now I'm not including like keyboard, monitor, all those kind of things. But yeah, that would give you a good place to be, and then obviously very upgradable. If this generation of AMD platform is anything like the original Ryzen platform, it's gonna be great because there'll just be a long life of upgrade path where we see great gains in performance each release. I mean, I was OG Ryzen back in the day. Got in with like a 1400, not even an X, I don't think. It was like a 4 core, and I just built just a little PC for the family to mess around with. Let's see here. Stock, all core, 93. Okay, this is interesting. So this is looking a little different than what we saw in the other. So it's averaging 60 watts. This looks like they put a little more effort into it. And they have stock, but they don't have eco mode. Oh, here's gaming. Okay, gaming, 45 watts. Yeah, that's the other thing. These processors, not just heat changes, but like they're able to kind of scale the power needs so well. Okay. That's interesting how they're doing like the watts per frames per watt. 1080p. That's kind of cool. Yeah, it's hard to find an eco mode here. Yeah, anyway, um these new 3D generation processors are kind of cool. I don't think any of them make sense for anybody really. Um Other than like software engineers that like to game, get a 7950 X3D makes sense because you're not losing too much of the raw performance, and you're doing well in those stuff. Or like a content creator, I guess it makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure somebody out there could give me some other cases. I think I'm echoing mostly what you're gonna hear from hardware review channels. If you're just a gamer and you do like a lot of browsing, you maybe watch Netflix on your computer, you're emailing, but you're not really running like anything that needs a lot of raw power other than your games. Like the 50 sorry, 7800. Even the 5800 X3D is probably plenty fine for you. Match it with some good RAM, good stuff. Get in there for a fairly cheap price. That thing's probably gonna smoke. You probably don't need anything better than that. The only thing is then you're on a platform that's essentially end of life. But yeah, the 7800 X3D seems pretty sick. It seems like a good place to get in. And then you kind of can just work your way up from there. What are they going for? Is this thing like, I think it's gonna be like $500. Yeah. So it's a fair chunk more expensive than my 7600 because I got mine even months ago for 220, I think. So I mean, we're almost double the price. Gosh, these 5800 X3Ds are still going for so much. That's a surprise. Okay, maybe it's not actually released yet. Or am I an idiot? Am I putting in the wrong? Okay. 70. Did I put it in? No, 7800. Okay, so it's not actually out yet. It must be. Yesterday was Tuesday. If it didn't come out yesterday, it must be coming out. Oh my god, I want one of these so bad. I'm a sucker for clicking on stuff like that. Where is price? Is that on? Here we go. Oh, $450. So that's pretty pricey. That's more than twice the price of my 7600X. Now, unless you're kind of running games like esports games, I just don't think it makes sense because like I said, I've run through a ton of games. Maybe I'll get in this now and kind of talk about the performance of my experience with performance in games. So yeah, like unless you're trying to get like that 300 frames per second in some kind of game like an Apex Legends, or it's got to be like a twitchy game, right? Apex Legends, that that kind of shooter game, Battlefield, Battlezone, stuff where um, input lag makes a big difference. It just isn't. It's just not really worth it. I mean, one, your eyes can't tell. Anybody that says they can is full of shit. Once you get to like 80 frames per second, your eyes are already like pretty maxed out, even the best eyes. Um, does it make a difference going from like 30 frames to 60? Oh yeah, massive difference in like how fluid things look. Going from 60 to 80 doesn't matter. Yeah, you can tell a difference. I can. I'm in my 40s. I can tell. Um, Going from 80 to 100, it's like for me, it's there. There's something there, but it's not really like very perceptible. And anything over that's like bullshit. Like, I've got the 144 hertz monitor rocking right now. I I move everything around. It looks great. It looks pretty good. But um if I put it at 100 hertz, would I notice? No. I mean, it's smooth. When I put it down to 60, yeah, I can notice. Like, it's very noticeable. And I've noticed before in the past when, like, somehow my machine gets kind of misconfigured and it drops me into 60, and it's like, it might take a little bit, but it's just my brain knows something is up. And then pretty soon it's like, yeah, this doesn't look as buttery smooth as it normally would. So, yeah, let's talk about like my performance kind of like what I've noticed just running games more organically, playing games. So I'm going to start out by saying one of the worst games out there Well, I'll call out two games, and funny enough, they're both Ubisoft games. Fuck you, Ubisoft, you fuckers. Um, and the games are okay. In typical like Ubisoft, they're like not risky, not really innovative, just like the same old shit they've been spewing out with like different paint brushes as like small stylistic changes. So yeah, it's Assassin's Creed, particularly Origins was the one. And then the other one is Far Cry 4. So I haven't played 5. I don't know if it still has these same type of issues. I do believe there's like a whole completely rewritten from scratch engine that's gone into maybe Far Cry 5 and also into um what was it? AC Valhalla, which that game does interest me, being of Viking descent and really enjoying like the lore and the history of like Nordic cultures does entice me a little, but I know it's just gonna be the same old fucking Ubisoft system, which is just like grind and like run quests that make no fucking sense. It's like, oh no, I lost my kid and I haven't seen him. Can you go find him? And it just like banal shit where it's like this is so far from fucking reality. Like, can you just come up with some quests that are like fucking useful to like somebody that's in a situation like my protagonist? It's like, yes, let me go find your fucking kids, even though the point of like my whole existence is I have some blood feud with some bad guys that fucked me over, killed my family. But yeah, I'm such a great guy. I'm gonna take some time to like, go find like your missing family member, or go fucking like farm a bunch of, you know, this or that, what you need. Oh, those alligators eating all your kids. All right, let me run out there and murder a bunch of them for you, because you can't just like, I don't know, pay some people or go out there yourself and kill the alligators. You gotta like have me do it. Anyway, I'm fucking ranting, but Ubisoft games, they're literally the fucking worst. Like, the system was kind of cool over 10 years ago. Get some fucking innovation or just fucking die already, okay? Fuck you, Ubisoft. Anyway, these games are also so poorly optimized. So they like need your hardware to just fucking be god tier just to get like mediocre performance compared to other companies' games. So yeah, what I noticed in Assassin's Creed Origins, I was running a Ryzen 1700X, and I had a number of different GPUs kind of paired with that over time. But what I would see is I would kind of get just a little better than console performance, which I guess is something. And it was okay. It was playable. It wasn't buttery smooth, and not at the highest settings even. I was kind of clocking it down. Now this was just like not a great GPU. I think one of them was like a uh Nvidia, what was it? Sorry, it's a, what was it, a 1600 something? It was a low tier Nvidia, like something Ti. And then I updated to an AMD 6600. Yeah, the 6600. And like both of those on this one PC would have the same problem. I'd put up the kind of all the readouts of the telemetry, CPU, heat measures, uh, CPU speed, GPU speed, utilization numbers, where it just boils down to like, a percent of what it thinks total utilization would be for that part, the CPU or the GPU. What I would see is just a profound lack of utilization on the GPU, which is pretty wild when you think like, I'm not even playing the game on a very high end part. Now, granted, it's an older game. It's from a while back. God, it's probably like 6 years old almost now. And this is me talking about testing it out like in the year ago, sooner, not even a year ago. Yeah, so I'd see like performance was oftentimes like barely in the 60s of utilization for the GPU. It was garbage, right? Um, and it just turned out like it just needed so much more raw CPU. Now the 1700X was not a CPU well known for just like that really raw, fast, you know, Ferrari like performance. On a CPU. It's like it had a lot of cores and it was very affordable when it came out at its time compared to Intel, And so if you're doing multi-processing, lots of cores were required. It was great. It killed the competition. And it was a pretty good gaming processor. I mean, a lot of games had no problem with that processor allowing you to get everything out of your GPU. Other games I would see 100% GPU utilization, no problem. Um, so just talking about the 6600, the AMD RX 6600 I mentioned earlier that I upgraded from the NVIDIA. So I had that, and this is like into last summer, beginning of fall. So I install that. I'm seeing, yeah, like 60% utilization. I overclock the processor. Best I can get is like sometimes in AC Origins, it gets into like the high 80s, low 90s, like 91, 92. And that's just like blips. So these are like the highest you see. But more often we're in like the high 60s now, low 70s with the overclock. Um, yeah, so around Black Friday, I get a 7600X. I get the new motherboard, new RAM. I upgrade all that. Now I get back into Origins. Now we're going from a processor that was, I want to say 3600, 3800 was kind of the boosty max. That was where it would be. To a processor that now I'm seeing 5400 often. So almost like 2000 megahertz increase. It's pretty big difference. And there are a lot of generational improvements made too between these processors as far as like the memory interfacing, other types of things. Obviously, different type of memory too. Where the DDR5 now, I have some great DDR5 super overclock right on the spot where you want it. So, what do I see now when I jump in and then playing AC Organs with the RX? Now I'm seeing 95 to 100 all the time. It still isn't a tight game, which I would say you notice when the utilization swings like 5% like that. That's not very tight. Other games, you're looking like 98, 99 all the time. And it's not often a lot of games you see 100. I don't know why that it is, but there's probably just something to how all that works. But yeah, 98, 99 on a lot of other games, especially these older titles around the same time. But even stuff like one of the best ones for kind of kicking tires on hardware and how it performs is Cyberpunk 77. I mean, it's a masterpiece. And it's just it seems to me, and I'm sure people can argue, but what they have as far as a game engine is pretty fucking amazing, and it performs really, really well, which says a lot to me about uh if you've heard, they're planning on axing all that and just going Unreal Engine 5. And it says a lot about Unreal Engine 5 when, you know, a company that's that adept at like the game engine technology says, nah, we're getting out of this. We're going to Unreal Engine 5. I mean, I don't know how that's going to work out. I've played Fortnite. I'm not a Fortnite player, but I've literally downloaded it to play with their new setup using Unreal Engine 5, and I can say it's fucking pretty incredible looking. You know, for a game like Fortnite to look that good is almost comical. It just goes to show you how much money that game is been making, that they could like just go and be like, yeah, let's make Fortnite look like one of the best games just out there in general. I mean, the water, the shadows, everything. It's phenomenal. Like that texture mapping they do with like rock and other types of surfaces. What's it called? I think one's called Lumen. That's like the shadowing and all that. Um, And then nanite, I believe, is like the texturing that like really helps with like rocks and other types of surfaces to really give it a very organic look. And just in general, how well that engine deals with like massive scale. Like you're like flying around and you can see just way out, and it just scales so well. It instead of doing like pop in and other stuff, it just kind of like blends it blurry and doesn't put a lot of resources into it. It's able to like morph the objects or something somehow, so what renders is very um low impact on the GPU, but what's near you and the stuff you see, I think it even does like field of vision, like the stuff more in the middle, it'll kind of like spend more processing power to kind of make it look good. I mean, UE5, sorry, I'm off on another tangent again. If what I've seen in Fortnite ends up kind of coming through for all these new Unreal Engine 5 games, it's going to be pretty fantastic. And I mean, it smokes, you know. It's doing the same type of tech that like Cyberpunk does, the shading and the lighting, like the ray tracing, reflections, all that. It's doing all that and running at like far faster speeds. It's pretty incredible, I have to say. So, where was I? Um anyway, we're talking about how great Cyberpunk kind of is, and yeah, if I go into Cyberpunk and I'm looking at the utilization, it's just up there. It's basically like as high as you can expect it to be, and that's with the even when I was running with like the 1700X processor and the RX 6600 GPU, it was up there. And then I go into Origins and I'm like getting pretty nice frame rates. I mean, again, it's like way better than console. You're getting like 55, let's say 50 frames per second. Not buttery smooth because you want to be more around 80 for me. That's where I really notice it being like the sweet spot. Not even the sweet spot, but like the high tier graphics, quality. Um, so maxed out more or less 80 frames, just as good as it's gonna look. But yeah, when I go back into Origins and it's getting those 50, 55, and I'm like it's at like 60 something utilization. I'm like I should be getting like the 80, right? And it's like it's just the processor. So I upgrade to the 7600, and I think it's pretty much as like optimized as it's going to get at that point. Like you're like the 95 and above, seeing much better frame rates, and um, it just goes to show you those fucking Ubisoft games, man. Like the engines are just garbage. They're not. I guess they just really don't fucking care about the PC market and understanding that it's like a company that builds software. You have to actually like have and employ people and put the effort into like building game engines that are optimal for taking advantage of certain things. Like whatever they build into their games that like creates so much like requirement on CPU processing, just to be able to then take advantage of like spewing out more frames is pretty interesting. Like I mean that's just got to be some really unoptimized code. And like I can't imagine it'd be that hard to like profile and like go through and find where, sorry, get into like super geeky like software development mind here. It can't be that difficult, right? To like, yeah, hook up a profiler, run this game. You're like seeing this utilization that's shit, and you're running on, yeah, running on a 1700X. It's like a 5 6 year old processor. It was like upper mid tier or lower high end tier, however you want to look at it, processor for its time. Look at that, be like, okay, the processor's definitely limiting us because it doesn't have 8,000 megahertz, which is a joke. I mean, I'm being facetious here. That like you shouldn't need a processor that powerful, but um, like even if it's mostly a single core game, which a lot of games were, I think these new engines like UE5 are much better about breaking down core components of the engine into ways where it can farm out the tasks and then bring them back together like quickly to do certain processing tasks. Like some things just don't make sense to do that with. There's like it's always going to be single core. There's certain things that will never not be single core. But there are certain tasks you could do. Um, and rendering for sure one of them where you could break something into multiple parts, have multiple things work on it, and then merge it all back together and do that in a way um, that allows for multiple cores to do the work. And, you know, potentially it won't give you a giant increase in performance. Might be something like 10%, but those oftentimes those kind of ways of building out your software could give you um, a potential for not bottlenecking as much, right? Because it's not so much that you're seeing that major performance difference. Let's say you get 10% better performance, and that's like your best case. It's really going to be like your worst case where you're going to see it a lot. The places where like the single core might just like really bind up, and the multi-core is able to just kind of like move past it and not have like, you know, giant like spike the single core has. Instead it just has like a little bump and it goes over it and it keeps moving. um it's kind of just like if you're moving water through a small pipe, you know, it might be able to move really fast as long as the volume of water is kind of this. In multi-pressing, it's basically just a bigger set. It's set of like the same pipe, say, but you got like a bunch of them now. And if you can shoot the water through all of them, um, you know, maybe you don't need all those pipes, but like when there is a need to push more volume of water, you would have those pipes and be able to use them. Hopefully that makes sense. But you can only do that in the gaming sense if the engine is set up to take advantage of it. And obviously, let's say Ubisoft's is not, their older version in Assassin's Creed 4. Assassin's Creed Origins. Anyway, so I don't know, I have a lot to say past this. I'm just rambling and you know, we've talked about how hardware configurations really can factor into the performance you're getting out of like chips, and so how you have to be kind of aware of things like that when you're watching these videos. You know, hardware unboxed, all these different guys, really makes a big difference. And talked about how like pre-built computers can be pretty shit because of this. Yeah, so you know, we got into kind of how things like the CPU could affect you in the software side, where if the game engine is just not well optimized, well, it then like, you know, you could have a super sick processor, but it's not going to mean anything. Or more likely have a super sick GPU, but you're just not getting the greatest performance because the CPU. And unfortunately, like in the past, I've I've gone like cheaper on the CPU, not super cheap, but like I have the 7600 right now, 7600X. It's only a 6 core processor. Yeah, 6 core processor, 12 threads. It's great for almost everything. Will I probably and the GPU now I'm upgrade to is like a, was it the new AMD 7800 XT. I was able to get one for like $820. It's like a big old honking XFX Merc or whatever they call it. Doesn't make much sound. Like in the worst cases, it's just a little audible. Um, but it's a pretty top tier GPU for right now. And I none of the games I have, AC Origins included, they're all smoking fast. So obviously by the time you get to like a 7600X with a game like AC Origins, CPU bottleneck no longer exists really. Um I mean, I get fully maxed out like, well, I think it's like 120 frames, and I even upgrade to a higher resolution monitor. I've got a super wide QHD now versus just running like the QHD before, and it runs buttery smooth on there, like 120 frames. So well over double what I was getting with the 6600 at a lower resolution. Um, is it bottlenecking? I don't think so. As far as utilization, it's up there. It's like 95% higher. Anyway, yeah, so software makes a big difference too. And maybe another time get into it, but there's also like the difference you see running all of your other apps, with your game. So if you run a game and you got Discord and you got maybe like different types of telemetry programs running, I run NZXT. I've got like my Razer Chroma, my Elgato stuff's running. Uh, OBS might be running. Just a bunch of shit, whole bunch of stuff. When you got all that going, you're you're gonna see some drops in frames because your processor's got to like kind of handle some fairly intensive other stuff that's going on. Anyway, that's another topic for another day. As for now, uh, if you watch this and you actually made it to the end, congratulations. Let me know in the comments, you know, what you think about this content, what you'd like to hear me talk about. I've been kind of in this tech shit for a very long time, and I have a lot of knowledge and background in it and stuff. I enjoy talking about. So yeah, hit me up, and look forward to hearing from you. That's it for today. Peace.